And they kept starting us further and further back in the field, and we kept winning every race. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, I started to think I think, geez, I might be able to do this, But then we went to Sydney Showground. It was a whole different ball game. It was it was big in those days, as I said. And I can remember being pretty much scared to death. You almost had to lift me into the car. And I remember sitting on the grid, and I'll never forget it. I was sitting next to a Tirana. So the Tirana was a bit higher than than the Mini that I was driving. And in those days, the driver's name was on the door sill, not up on the top. It was on the door sill. And I was lined up next to a guy called Nigel Death. But it was spelt Death, D-E-A-T-H. So I look around, and all I see staring in my face is death, like I wasn't scared enough,
Yeah. You were saying as well when you were at school you were into rugby league. Was it league or was it union?
Yeah, no, it was league.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I was into it that much. I kind of just fell into it that way because that's what they did. The kids in the especially in the primary school were really good at sport. They were great at cricket and great at football. I kind of got roped into it a little bit because I wasn't sportsman material at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just remember one day that, and especially a lot of the Aboriginal kids, they're fantastic at sport. They're really, really fit and really good at, cricket. But one day I remember, and this is how I got into playing cricket, was that I was walking through the playground, minding my own business. There was a big cricket match going on down on the field, and I heard somebody sing out, "Look out!" And I sort of turned around, a cricket ball hit me right in the chest. And it hit me so hard, it knocked me flat on my back. And obviously my hands went to my chest.
Yeah.
Right? Took all the wind away, and I thought I'd died. And I sort of opened my eyes, and there was a whole bunch of kids all standing looking down at me. And one of them goes, "He's still got it. You're out." So all of a sudden I was a superstar cricketer, And it kind of that's about the only I tumbled into that really.
Yeah. And you were saying about your bricklaying. Was it 14 when you left school?
Yeah, I was 14. Yeah, 14 and 9 months to be exact, right to the day.
What was that like leaving school at that age? Because I left school in year 10, but I was 17, I think. But
yeah, right.
Was that intimidating for you going into the workforce at that age, or not really?
No, not really. I mean, it was just, look, I've never really felt intimidated with anything. It's just life to me.
Yeah.
And it's about putting one foot in front of the other and seeing what happens next, Yeah. And then whatever comes along, you deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I've done all my life. So, no, it wasn't intimidating. And, I remember, it was a long time ago, and we were out in, that was my very first job. I was out in it was pretty much desert out at Kurnell, just all sand. And when they were building that oil refinery, there was they didn't have concrete pumps in those days. What they had was a big steel vat that the truck could back up to, which is on the edge of the road, fill the concrete vat. So my job was to shovel the concrete out of the vat into a wheelbarrow and then wheel the wheelbarrow along probably 300 metres of, 6-inch wide planks, painter's planks, to get to where the bricklayers were actually building. And then you shovel out of that onto their boards and go back and get another load. So kind of didn't take a lot of brains to do that, but I got fit.
I was going to say a lot of fitness.
Yeah. But I had I met a lot of really good guys and had a good team around us, and it was fun, mate. As I said, life's been a big adventure. It's never been dull. You know?
Were your parents influential in you and your brother becoming entrepreneurial, or were they
not
strict
at all.
or anything or like that?
Not at all. My brother was, he was 6 years older than me, so he actually got a pretty good education. Yeah. And Mum and Dad put him into private school, and got him tutors and stuff like that. But there's a big gap there when you're when in 6 years doesn't sound like a lot, but in those at that age, it is a lot. You know what I mean? So he went down through the corporate world.
Yep.
So I think we were both ends of the spectrum. I was kind of streetwise, and my brother went through and got a really good education and grew up in the corporate world.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that he didn't do it himself. He did. I think he started off in the mailroom and worked up through one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world, George Patterson Advertising. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Wow. And then obviously your motorsports career, we'll go back and forth in this podcast. That's what it's all about.
Well, that's right. That's what I thought we'd come here to talk about race cars, you know.
Well, into race cars now, you did get into Speedway. How'd you get into Speedway growing up though? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, look, I was pretty reasonably successful with the street racing, but it wasn't as exciting as what I would have liked it to be. And I just went along, watched the Speedway one time, thought, yeah, I reckon I can do that.
what Speedway was it?
Well, to be honest, I used to go to Sydney Showground.
Yep.
But I got a break because there was a guy that owned a service station out at Matraville, not far from where I lived, and I convinced him that I could drive, and he sponsored me into a Mini, which was for the showground, for Sydney Showground. But Sydney Showground in those days was big, it was huge.
Yeah.
You know, that was like the king of Speedway there in those days. But we went down to Kembla Grange down near Wollongong.
Yep.
He took me down there and we ran a few races down there. And they kept starting us further and further back in the field, and we kept winning every race. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, I started to think I might be able to do this, you know. But then we went to Sydney Showground. It was a whole different ball game. It was big in those days, as I said. And I can remember being pretty much scared to death. You almost had to lift me into the car. And I remember sitting on the grid, and I'll never forget it. I was sitting next to a Tirana. So the Tirana was a bit higher than the Mini that I was driving. And in those days, the driver's name was on the door sill, not up on the top. Yep. It was on the door sill. And I was lined up next to a guy called Nigel Death. But it was spelt Death, D-E-A-T-H. So I look around and all I see staring me face is death, you know. Like I wasn't scared enough, you know.
Yeah.
So that's how that was my start in Speedway. Yeah. And I did a few years in that. And then
where did they plonk the cars? Because I've seen where obviously now at Fox Studios where the Speedway was. Where were the cars parked to come onto the Speedway?
Yeah. In the bull ring underneath where they have all the animals that come out.
Okay.
So they called it the bull ring. I don't know what they call it nowadays, but probably still the same thing. But yeah, the cars were all under there.
Yeah. Were you intimidated by the crowd though, or by what you're going out there to do? Well, because it was, it was packed. Do you know what I mean?
It was. Oh, yeah. There was big crowds. No, the crowd didn't intimidate me. I mean, I really liked that, and as I've said many times, I enjoy the people. It was more. I think it was more that I didn't want to look bad. You know.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to go out there and do really well. So that was intimidating. You know. Plus, I'd seen a couple of guys, you know, that were sort of had some really big wrecks, even in Speedway. I thought, I don't know if that looks like fun. But anyway, I've had my share of them too. So yeah.
No. What other Speedway like racing did you do though? Did you do midgets or anything like that, or not?
No, it was mainly sedans.
Yeah.
Because I went from there. That was it was only a few years after that Liverpool Speedway went to asphalt, and then a number of asphalt tracks were built around Australia. So I got into that. And,
as in circles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speedway. Yeah. Liverpool was probably the best.
Yeah.
It had a bit of banking and quarter mile circuit and, 800 horsepower. That was wild racing. I mean, but it was great racing and a lot of really good people. I've been pretty fortunate. I reckon I was thinking on the way down here, I've probably had about 4 careers in different types of racing. You know, I mean, I've had the short tracks, asphalt, NASCAR, which was big for me, of course. Probably my most successful. And then the V8 Utes after that. And that was my first real introduction into flat track.
Yeah.
And I think because I came from a pretty successful career in NASCAR, everybody thought I was going to be a superstar on the flat track as well. But I think I did all right, but I never felt that I was great at it. I think I did well enough to get good sponsors and, always managed to run in, reasonable sort of positions. Yeah. But it was so different. And in fact, I was trying to explain to somebody not long ago the difference between, NASCAR, that style of racing, compared to the flat tracks where you really got to slow down to get into the corner and then come off fast. And, NASCAR is all about getting in there as fast and hard as you can, man, and coming out to the side like you've been fired out of a cannon, So it's a big difference. It's a little bit, even though they're both, it's both motorsport, but it's a bit like, I guess, like tennis or squash. Both racquetball games, you've got a ball and you've got a racket, but it's just a different method and a different, just a different approach to everything, and the difference between the sort of racing that I was used to, the NASCAR racing, the high track, the high banked ovals, and the road courses. I still find it hard to to slow down enough to go into a corner. I run in too hard. I still do that, even though I've done like a billion laps.
Yeah,
and still do. As I said, I still spend 3 or 4 days a week in a race car. And
so your racing
7 or
eventually
8 hours.
started from that servo guy sponsoring you, and then
pretty much started there.
Yeah,
right. He really was the first one to get me into motor racing.
Yeah. But and then you just pushed your way through. Is that how you? And then you worked your marketing around that. Like how? Did
I worked the marketing around it. I mean, you're always looking for money; it never ends, and you got to chase the money. And I guess when I was in NASCAR in the earlier days, there the group it wasn't supercars, and then I think there were Group A's.
Yeah.
So it was V8 Group A cars. They kind of weren't going anywhere, and I had an opportunity to sort of go down that road a little bit, but I was really heavily sponsored with NASCAR and had a really successful career. I was making good money out of NASCAR.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of hard to walk away from that and go into a thing. In hindsight, did I make the wrong choice? Yeah, I don't know. That's arguable. I don't think so, because I think I had in my time, I think I had a fantastic career. I loved every second of it. Unfortunately, it kind of died out here in Australia. And for a long time there, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And but I was, again, just never off planes. I had my family living there. My girls were young, just about to go into high school. And it kind of...
So your girls were
I didn't want to live there.
Yeah, right. Oh, but you were living there partly in North Carolina with your
family?
Well,
I lived there for a couple of years, but I had my family living there full-time, whereas I was on a plane. I'd be in a race car there and then out of a race car on an aeroplane, then be racing here and then back on a plane. So it was just, it was a hard way to live. And look, I liked America. I loved it. I enjoyed our time in America, but I didn't want to bring my kids up there. Yeah. And I had a lot more opportunities here anyway. It was really, really difficult to get big budgets in America unless you were part of the Bible Belt. And,
what's the Bible Belt? Like, was it their like little clique? Was it? Is it the way?
It's a big clique, mate.
Yeah,
okay. You got to go to church every single Sunday, twice a day, and you got to be.
Yeah.
Let's leave that bit alone as well. But,
I'm pretty sure Tony voiced that in his podcast.
You got to be a long-haired lover of Jesus, mate, to be able to. So as I said, let's leave that alone.
But in NASCAR, as you're saying, you reckon it was worth it here. Do you reckon it could have? Do you reckon it could have gone beyond the Thunderdome if it gone a different way? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. I think if had we had another super speedway, maybe in Queensland or somewhere else. I mean, we ran on the Thunderdome, obviously, and we had the half-mile bowl in Adelaide, which was fantastic racing. I mean, the crowds there just packed that place. The crowds were so vocal, we could hear them in the race cars. And when you're sitting in there with 800 horsepower screaming in your ear, it's pretty loud, but you could hear the crowd. It was so exciting. It was really exciting. Yeah. And then, of course, we took in a number of road courses as well, which was great. I ran the first 5 years of Surfers Paradise with the Indy cars.
Yeah.
So that was when it was the really long track, like high speed. And that was exciting. It was great. I mean, but it was a bit of a party. I mean, we were up there for a week doing a bit of testing, and pretty much at the end of the week, if you could round your crew up, we'd go racing.
That's how it worked.
That's how it worked,
right. Yeah.
So, a lot of fun. But you just like anything, mate, you never stop trying to find money. It's never ending.
But you got some cool sponsors back then. You had Pennzoil and Optus, and that was obviously due to your like entrepreneurial, like creating.
Yeah, pretty much. Look, and again, one thing sort of leads to another. But I had great sponsors, but they were great people as well. Like the people with the Real McCoy, for instance. The Real McCoy were, I ran a 3-car NASCAR team with the Real McCoy, Bourbon. And they were just great people and a lot of fun to be around, to be with, And that probably would have went on a lot longer. I think I had Real McCoy for about 3 years, but they were bought out. Real McCoy was bought out by, I think it was UDL, and they had a worldwide policy against motorsport.
Right.
So that kind of killed that. There was nothing anybody could do about it. It was just it was a policy that was written into their, written into the rules. There was no negotiations on that. So that kind of killed that. But I had a lot of others like Optus, Triple M. Triple M were great. They were a lot of fun. They were good. They were good people.
I think from your sponsorship, that's why they hung around longer at Parramatta Speedway. Do you know what I mean? Because they were doing the 2-seater.
Yeah, that's right. They did.
Yeah,
that's right. They did. So that was pretty cool. And then Promar Systems, they were good sponsors on the NASCAR. And again, I'd like to think that pretty much every sponsor I've ever had is I could ring up at any time and have a great conversation with them, because I always try to give back a lot more than what I took.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is really important for, young guys to remember. It's easy to think that, you're going to go out there and put your hand out and somebody's going to give you a handful of money and you're just going to put their name on a race car. It doesn't work that way. Especially nowadays. It's actually a lot harder nowadays even than what it was back then. It was tough enough then, but nowadays you've got accountants that want to get involved, and it's got to be transparent. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's giving you $300,000 or $400,000, they want to know they're getting $800,000 worth of value out of it.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to show that. Unless you got a mate that's CEO of some big company or whatever and just loves doing what he does.
Yeah, and just having a good time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Exactly.
So you had to kind of create, back then in the 90s and obviously the early 2000s as well, and even in the Super Utes days, you had to kind of create an aura around you to keep them involved. Is that how?
Yeah, you do. And it's not hard to keep them involved. I mean, if you can get them involved in the first place, then they obviously have a love for it. So then once you encourage them to make sure they come along, bring some sponsors, and if you can put them into a race car, that's the best thing you could ever do, because there is nothing like making a friend out of a client.
Yeah,
nothing works better than putting them in a race car. Let me tell you, they just love it. I mean, and it's like what I do now for a living. It's just such a feel-good business. You give people a thrill. They go away believing they've just done something they never ever thought they'd be able to do in their life. And it's a pretty cool thing to be able to do.
When did you start V8 Race though? When was the first?
Well, I started. I didn't actually start V8 Race. What happened was I actually started another company called NASCAR, which was a similar thing on the Thunderdome.
Yeah,
and I then took that to America. And I started it in America with Richard Petty.
Yeah,
so it was Richard Petty, myself, and I brought Barry Graham into that as well.
Yep.
And I'll never forget you talk about sitting in boardrooms. I was in the boardroom with Humpy Wheeler, who was like the head honcho over there in Charlotte Motor Speedway.
Yeah.
And Richard goes, you tell him, George, tell him what you're going to do. So when I told Humpy Wheeler I was going to put somebody in NASCAR and let them drive it and follow me around the track, he sat there very quiet for about 5 minutes trying to sort of absorb it. And he said, you're going to what? So had to go through it again. He just couldn't get his head around it.
Yeah.
And then, that was something else that sort of continued to grow. And again, when I didn't really want to live in America anymore, I sold out of that and came back to Australia. And then Marshall Brewer and a couple of other people had started Fast Track in Auscars.
Yep.
And I think they started to grow it then. And I kind of got a little bit involved with Kim Jane, because Kim and I raced together for years. Kim Jane and I raced banging, trying to kill each other for about 20 years, I guess. And Kim was involved, and he said to me, Marshall wants to sort of sell out. You want to get involved. So I got involved in that, and Kim and I didn't buy Marshall out, but we bought into the company.
Yeah.
And then it kind of grew from there. And then eventually I bought Kim out and I bought Marshall out.
Yeah.
And we were sort of banging heads a little bit with V8 Race. And I think Greg Evans rang one day and spoke to me and had a chat, said, George, what are we doing? Like, why don't we get together and have a bit of a chat and see whether or not it's something we can do together? So we brought the two companies together, and I've got to say the first year was tough. They had a lot of different ideas on how to run the business than what I did and what we did. And but after about a year, we sorted out all the egos because it's an ego-driven business, as you know. Motor racing, man. If you
everyone has to be the top.
Well, you know what, and you pretty much got to. I learned a long time ago too that I don't care how good you are. You got to be able to tell yourself, you know what, I'm the best there is.
Yeah.
If you can't tell yourself that and convince yourself that out, you ain't ever going to be the best.
Yeah.
And you're never going to win.
Yeah.
So as corny as that sounds,
I think that's every sport. I've even heard Clarissa Shields, one of the top boxers in the world, that was in an interview, and she said the same thing. She goes, if I don't walk into the Olympics and say, I am going to win and I am the best, she goes, why the hell am I there?
Yeah.
You've got to believe it. Yeah.
It's true. It's psychological, but you got to be able to you really got to believe when you walk out there or when you drive out there, man, I'm the best there is.
Want to hear more? Each week we will share the hottest clips from our guest interviews on YouTube. But to hear the full episode, make sure to subscribe or follow us on your favourite podcast platform.